This video is part of a short Foundations series of 6, where we step back from individual texts to clarify the deeper categories Paul assumes when he speaks about relationships. When Christians talk about order, they often assume they already know what the word means. Order sounds like hierarchy. It sounds like ranking. It sounds like someone being over someone else, and because of that, order is often treated as a polite word for authority. But that assumption needs to be examined very carefully, because if order simply means hierarchy, then we are forced into a dilemma. Either we defend hierarchy as necessary and good, or we try to flatten relationships to escape it. Paul does neither. So before we talk about husbands and wives, before we talk about church leadership, before we talk about submission or authority, we need to slow down and ask a more basic question. What do we actually mean by order? And is hierarchy really the right category? Let's begin with Genesis. In Genesis 2, there is clearly order. The man is formed first. The woman is formed from the man. The man names the animals. The woman is given as a corresponding partner. There is sequence. There is direction. There is structure. But there is no command. There is no rank. There is no exercise of control. Nothing in Genesis 2 suggests that order exists because one human must rule another. Order is simply there, woven into the way relationships are given. Life is received, not seized. Difference exists without rivalry. Direction exists without domination. Genesis 2 does not present order as something that has to be imposed. Rather, it presents order as something that already exists, because creation is given, not fought over. That distinction is crucial. Hierarchy, by contrast, is a way of managing disorder. Hierarchy becomes necessary when trust has broken down. It emerges when relationships are no longer sustained by gift, but must be stabilized by power. Hierarchy answers questions like, who decides? Who enforces? Who has the final say? Those questions are not asked in Genesis 2. They arise in Genesis 3. And that tells us something important. Hierarchy is not the definition of order. It is one response to the loss of order. To confuse the two is to read the effects of the fall back into creation itself. This is where many Christian debates quietly go wrong. They assume that because order is good, and because hierarchy can sometimes restrain chaos, hierarchy must therefore be part of God's original design. But that conclusion does not follow. Order and hierarchy are not the same thing. Order describes how relationships fit together, whereas hierarchy describes how power is distributed. Those are different questions. You can have hierarchy without order. You can also have order without hierarchy. Genesis 2 shows us the latter. Paul understands this distinction. That is why Paul almost never uses authority language when he talks about relationships. Instead, he speaks in a different grammar: origin and response, gift and reception, love and reverence, image and glory. These are not power categories. They are relational categories. Paul is not asking, who should rule? Rather, he is asking, how does redeemed life become visible? And that difference matters, because once order is defined in terms of power, relationships immediately become defensive. Someone must be protected. Someone must be restrained. Someone must be kept in check. But when order is understood relationally, the focus shifts. The question is no longer, who has authority? But, how does life flow rightly between persons? This is why Paul can speak of asymmetry without domination. He can speak of difference without threat. He can speak of direction without control. Order, for Paul, is not enforced. It is displayed. It becomes visible through fitting actions that correspond to relational truth. That is why Paul cares so deeply about visibility, about glory, about honor, about what relationships look like when they are lived out. Order is not something hidden behind power. It is something seen. So let's state this clearly. Order does not mean hierarchy. Hierarchy is one way humans try to manage the collapse of trust, but it is not the essence of order itself. Order names the coherence of relationships as God gives them. It names how life is received, shared, and returned. It names relational fittingness, not rank. If we fail to make this distinction, we will keep forcing Paul into categories he is not using, and his teaching will continue to sound either authoritarian or incoherent. But if we recover a relational understanding of order, something changes. Genesis 2 stops sounding naive, Paul stops sounding evasive, and the possibility of ordered life without domination comes back into view. In the next video, we will take this one step further. We'll ask why origin does not equal authority, and why being from someone is not the same thing as being under their control. That question is foundational, and without answering it, the rest of Paul's relational grammar cannot be heard properly. Thank you for watching.